Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 284 of the Assorted Calibers podcast. The Second Amendment podcast is a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and with me tonight, she's amazing. She's wonderful. You need to tell her. She's the greatest hostess in the world, Erin Paulette. How you doing, Erin?
Voulez-vous coucher avec moi ce soir?
I don't even know what that means from Lady Marmalade.
I believe it's, would you go home with me tonight?
Yeah.
It's a pickup line.
Well, there. Insert Buffalo Bill clip that I don't want to bleep. Silence of the Lambs is such a good movie.
Would you fudge me? Because I'd fudge me.
So how are you doing, Erin?
Yeah, literally, voulez-vous coucher avec moi ce soir means would you like to sleep with me tonight?
Well, there.
I
am tired.
I'm doing a lot better, mainly because this week isn't last week, and last week just seemed to be a perfect storm of a whole bunch of things, and I don't even know what they were, but I mean, I was tired and punchy from coming back from a convention, and of course, you know, I had to fly up to the convention and be at the convention, and so I was probably not only just tired, but also coming down off the adrenaline, and I might have caught a little bit of con cred that I was fighting off, and probably had my monthly depression, and it all just kicked in, and I was just, oh God, everyone hates me, what's the point? Miserable, and it's not like I woke up one day and everything was better, but sort of like a dimmer switch, you know, there reaches a point where you say, okay, yeah, it is clearly now light inside, and that's what happened. It was just, okay, things don't suck as much. I have no idea what changed.
Well, I'm glad things don't suck as much.
Yeah, me too. So, the big thing that's going on right now is that, and I believe I mentioned this before, that we've got the my dad's old bedroom and closet and whatever, all that has been recarpeted, and I'm slowly moving my stuff in, and it's taking a while because I'd rather do it slow and do it right than, okay, now I've just got a whole bunch of boxes and cause stress. Mm-hmm. But the fact that I'm exerting control over my immediate environment, even though it's work, that's comforting somehow. You know, it appeals to my nesting instinct, and so that's good. So yeah, that's how I'm doing. How are you doing, Weer'd?
I'm doing all right. I hate to say that I am chilly. Obviously, you know, a Southerner like you and David, an oddball, would appreciate the fact that like it hasn't, like, today was like the first day where it got up to freezing.
Oh wow.
like 33 degrees, balmy. Actually, there's a little weather app on my computer right now. It is actually 35 degrees outside, which is I'm not buying that because I clearly saw ice crystals on my porch just before I came down here. So maybe it needs to be up to date. But yeah, the entirety of my part of Massachusetts is just a frozen hellscape, where it's just ice. But when you get up in the morning, you look out the window and you see nothing but ice, but it's also bone dry ice. And you know, yeah, I'm going to need to wear the heavy jacket today. But yeah, then it's warmed up a little bit. We've got smatterings of snow, but yeah, that's all. Just doing family stuff. And yeah, that's I got nothing. Following politics because the primaries are starting to happen, and I don't do sports, sports, I've never been able to connect with sports, but watching politics, even if it's not races that I care about, even if it's not candidates that I like watching the ponies, and and then what was the other thing that's happening? Politics and I don't know. It'll come to me. I forget now. I'm punchy because we've just been cracking wise for like the last half hour straight, and it's pretty hilarious. So either way, I'm glad you're feeling better, Aaron, and it raises my spirits as well, and may it raise all of our listeners' spirits. You know what will raise my spirits even more, Aaron?
A good kick in the balls.
A good kick in the balls to Wayne LaPierre.
Oh.
Because speaking of ponies to watch, the NRA trial is going on as we speak in New York, and it's getting it's getting spicy. And I picked out two news stories. This first one here, it titled "Former NRA Lobbyist Disgusted by Wayne LaPierre's Spending Habits." And the lobbyist in question is Chris Cox, the former head of the NRA ILA, and he essentially got booted from the NRA. He resigned, but they gave him a sword to fall on. And I will say that I actually knew somebody who worked for ILA, and they had worked in another section of it, and they will remain nameless because I don't know if this was an on the record comment, but essentially I'm like, oh, so what are you doing now? Oh, I switched over to move into the ILA, the only clean corner of this organization.
Mm-hmm.
And,
of course, that's tainted now, not necessarily because the ILA did anything wrong, but because the NRA was pillaging it the way it pillaged everything else to pay for legal fees.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, up to and including selling off parts of its historic gun museum.
Yeah, that's
right.
That's
but we were talking about Chris Cox.
Yes, and I will say right now, I remember when we were in Indianapolis in 2019. Feels like 100 years ago,
mm-hmm.
and like
in the before times.
It was distinctly in the before times, and we started seeing essentially Ollie North called for Wayne LaPierre's resignation, and being that we were there to record a podcast, I was like, oh, how am I going to talk about this in a podcast? And I had it in my mind, if he turned around and resigned graciously upon that request, that first request from Ollie North, the nice one, because we were, if you listen back to that episode, we got into the nasty one, but I would have been more than happy to give Wayne LaPierre a hero's burial and essentially talk about some of the good things that he did in directing the organization, specifically through like the 90s assault weapons ban, and all of that. And I was hoping that Wayne would step down and Chris Cox would take his place. And that I think that would have been glorious. And unfortunately that did not happen. Wayne did not step down. Wayne got a vote of no confidence, of which there was a unanimous vote of approval for him behind closed doors, of which several members that voted in that section said that they absolutely did not vote for Wayne to stay. So unanimous. So either way, that was the very clear sign that the NRA was rotten to the core. And then Chris Cox got ousted, which is not a surprise if you were paying attention. And he was called as a witness in the trial, and just essentially stated that he was disgusted at how much Wayne LaPierre was spending on various personal accounts and essentially doing money laundering to get himself pocket money that wouldn't need to be disclosed. And of course, we have here, we've reported on this multiple times, that one of the things that keeps coming up in all these reports is that he spent $250,000 in luxury clothing, including suits. And one thing I do want to throw a little bit of shade at Executive Vice President of the National Rifle Association. The one thing that we don't hear about Wayne spending lavish amounts of money on is firearms, which, given his station, and given what would happen to any of us if we had, say, won the lottery, our gun safes are going to grow. And I don't even know if Wayne owned any guns.
I don't know either. One thing that seems to have been forgotten, and maybe because it was disproven, I don't know, but I remember in the early parts of this, there was an accusation that he was paying for an apartment for a young, pretty administrative assistant, and some people think there was an affair going on, and that's been dropped. I really thought we'd see more of that by now.
Oh yeah, no, I absolutely heard all of that, and has it been dropped? Because like I said, I haven't seen much of it as of recently, and so didn't really feel the need to put that in. But that has been dropped, huh?
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, talking about this and all the lavish things, like all the suits and all of the private plane trips and things like that. I remember that was another thing which came to light, and I haven't heard anything about that for years. So that was me asking, have you heard anything? Has it been disproven?
No, I haven't heard one thing or another. So it could be that it was just a rumor, or it was happening, but nobody has any receipts for it. Or it could be that they're saving the best for last, and they're going to start talking about Wayne banging the help as the coup de grace.
Well, I mean, I'm not really sure if this would be the coup de grace, but we mentioned, I think it was last week, when Josh Powell made his plea arrangement, and one of the conditions of that was he would be called to testify. Mm-hmm. And so as interesting as Chris Cox's testimony is, I think Josh Powell is going to be a lot juicier.
Especially since Chris Cox was, by all accounts, the clean guy. And so, yeah, if he's not on the take, how much are they going to share with him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there's a line in here just before we wrap this up. Yeah, so Chris Cox had some problems with how Ackerman McQueen was doing things, and he questioned LaPierre as to why he was backing them for a lot of these projects, which he considered arrogant and tone-deaf. And I think all of us can remember at least one thing that fits that category. And the article here says, when Cox voiced those concerns, he said LaPierre shut them down vehemently. Quote, "I've only heard Wayne LaPierre use profanity twice," end quote, Cox said, claiming that both were times that he questioned Ackerman McQueen's work.
Yeah.
So when you are using profanity at your subordinate, there is not a professional relationship there.
Yeah, and furthermore, again, we mentioned at the start of all of this that Ackerman McQueen was the NRA's PR firm, and they were so much the NRA's PR firm that the NRA was their only client. And of course, now it's coming out that Wayne would borrow the Ackerman McQueen credit card, run up bills, and then Ackerman McQueen would bill the NRA back on expenses unspecified for that credit card bill. And so it was, again, a way to launder the money, so to speak, so that you could spend money on inappropriate things without it going through. And so, yeah, I can understand that he was probably spinning mad because Ackerman McQueen was playing ball and you don't want to mess around with that when you're getting houses and luxury suits and potentially paramours out of the deal.
Well, fortunately, we aren't the only people who are disgusted. And I don't mean just you and me, Weer'd, but I mean, our listeners, people who are or were members of the organization. But there is someone who is not only a member of the NRA, but is serving on their board, who has, he's been vocal before, but he is very vehemently standing up and saying enough is enough. And I don't know if folks have seen this. There's an article on his website, and there have been videos about it. But Owen Buzz Mills has written an open letter to the board of directors of the NRA, and I'm really not sure how to summarize it without using profanity. To Mr. Mills' credit, he phrased it very eloquently. But it was the most, he managed to express his disapproval without using profanity in a way that I think would make drill sergeants impressed. And the short version is, you need to go un-F yourselves, and here's how we do it, because otherwise this organization is going to be worthless. And it's a really, really great letter.
Yeah.
Have you read it, Weer'd?
I have, and I will say that the opening of it is essentially more of what we heard from the Chris Cox one, which is just on the laundering of money and the spending, and what we talked about last week on the fact that the NRA just ignores the bylaws and the procedurals and just kind of lets things happen. But the big one is that it gets real hot towards the end, where he talks about how it is looking like Charles Cotton is the heir apparent of the as the next executive vice president. And let's see, there was one line that I saw.
Oh, you're talking about where he asked the rhetorical question if the principal facilitator of the misappropriation of tens of millions of dollars and behind causing the hundreds of millions of dollars of legal fees, should he have any business with access to the Treasury?
Yes.
Does he have any rights to represent any moral, honest person or organization? No. All caps.
Yeah, essentially pointing out the fact that Charles Cotton has so much blood on his hands, and bringing him in the wake of LaPierre going out is, well, exactly what anybody cynical about the NRA is predicting. But then to add it on a positive note, he suggests that the solution would be select a search committee of business professionals from the NRA board of directors, selected from the floor by the board of directors. Retain professional employment agencies to recruit, screen, and interview potential candidates. The search committee shall interview and screen candidates. Board of directors meets and greets the candidates. Let's see. Oh, that's the...
You are almost done. After they meet and greet, they vote to select a candidate, and then the search committee sets forth the terms and conditions of the employment contract.
Yes. Yep. That's the there. This is the part that I was looking for. I was expecting to read that, but I remembered it wrong. I thought it was in the bulleted points. But the NRA would then have a professional run the business of a world-class organization according with the application of laws, customs, and traditions. Oversight would be provided by professional board of directors that is congruent with the bylaws and effects circuitry. And next, we hire a celebrity face of the NRA as a spokesperson with no access to funds, using a process similar to finding an executive vice president. And I really liked that, is the bring somebody in who is a well-known person within the firearms and shooting community. Tom Selleck popped into my head immediately as the face of the NRA, but have this person essentially have no power within the organization and directing it, because again, it will all be business people. It'll all be essentially suits running the running the organization with heavy oversight and actually following the bylaws. But the actual figurehead of the NRA, so to speak, will be just simply someone who is there entirely out of their own passion and completely incapable of lining their own pockets, and someone who just cares about the Second Amendment and has no need for any sort of treasure for it, just defending the Second Amendment and moving the ball down the road for gun rights. It's just such a great idea. And
so my question here, and I want you to sell me on this, because I'm asking, why do they need a celebrity face? I don't think that they need one in order to be effective. I think the only reason they would need one would be to appeal to people to get them to rejoin and raise money. And my approach is the best way to do that is to show people through your actions that you are a worthy organization and you deserve support and money. So instead of having a celebrity face, how about you get back to your core mission of Second Amendment advocacy and firearms education? And I think that'll bring people in more than a celebrity face. But I'm obviously not a marketing professional. I'm not a business person. I could very well be wrong. So, Weer'd, if I'm wrong, sell me on why this is right.
So first up, you're not wrong, Aaron. Everything you said is absolutely true and has a potential for success. I still would side on the celebrity face idea in the fact that, like I said, I mentioned to you, I said, I don't even know if Wayne LaPierre owns guns. And you're like, I don't know either. I would not be surprised. I mean, that's not true. I would be surprised if he didn't own any guns. I would not be surprised if he didn't own a single gun that he had purchased for himself. I suspect as the head of the NRA that he has been given a lot of gift guns, and maybe some of them got pawned off for the things that he likes more. But maybe some of them just are kept along just as memento keepsakes. But like, you never hear Wayne LaPierre talking about his carry gun. I've never seen Wayne LaPierre shoot in anything but the safari video that surfaced and going through, and he shot like crap. The only thing I would expect him to have would be sporting guns. Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't expect him to have an AR-15.
No.
I just wouldn't.
No, I wouldn't at all either. But either way, what I'm trying to say is that Wayne LaPierre is kind of a nebulous face of the organization. We know him because of his association, and he's been there for so long that, like, many of our listeners, he's the only head of the NRA. But to have somebody who is somebody like a Tom Selleck or a Ted Nugent, or I'm trying to think of some other people that are Keanu Reeves, though Keanu would not be the choice because he's still at the peak of his career, and it would be a major pay cut for him to take on this gig. But a Michael Rooker, a character, someone who is well known to people and is charismatic, but is also a well-known shooter, a well-known person within the community. Someone you absolutely know that when they say they support the Second Amendment, there's no ulterior motives. And then, and as an example, I give is, I mentioned talking. Giving Wayne a hero's burial if he had stepped down gracefully, talking about the time in the 90s. And I've heard some criticism against Charlton Heston as the when he was the NRA president. but I will say that I remember, and this was back when I was still an anti-gun person, seeing Charlton Heston as the head of the NRA, and he did a ton of press interviews and he really was just getting out there and pressing the flesh as the NRA president. And I found that to be quite impressive, especially since I was someone who was applauding the assault weapons ban. And so it was, I think that also the fact that it's a celebrity face, it's somebody familiar to the public, would also be a good way to get that in on doing interviews with, talk shows and news shows and YouTube channels and that sort of stuff as a way to start clearing the air.
So, Guns and Gadgets, the YouTuber who won the prize for most influential Second Amendment advocate at the Gundies that I was running for, but I don't have any hard feelings. In his video, he suggested Donald Trump Jr., and I don't know how you feel about that. I think that would be a bad idea. I will acknowledge that Trump Jr. is very avid in his support of the Second Amendment, much more so than his father. And given his wealth, he should be immune to corruption. My main objection is very similar to my objection that I had with the nomination of Oliver North for president back in 2018. It's that, and I will acknowledge that this is unfair, but this is the world we live in, because he's got the Trump name attached. That brings with it not just baggage, but tons and tons of haters. And I think for a organization that is trying to rebuild itself, you want as little baggage as possible. You want everything to be as immaculate as possible. And so this is no respect to Donald Jr., but I think that would attract all of the wrong attention when the organization needs to be focused on all of the right attention.
I 100% agree with you on that. I mean, I know Donald Trump Jr. is an avid hunter. I don't necessarily know how avid a Second Amendment supporter he is. That's just he certainly talked a good talk, but so did his dad. And also the partisan nature of Donald Trump Jr. is a huge problem. Again, I'm always saying that all the guns that were bought during the COVID lockdown, there wasn't all white male Republicans. It's just impossible, and there's lots of evidence that lots and lots of left of center minority urbanites bought guns during the pandemic gun rush, and we need to foster them. We need to absolutely shed as much of the National Republican Association, that's common anti-gun gag towards the NRA, that it's a right-wing group, and it shouldn't be. And furthermore, the Second Amendment is not a right-wing thing. Right now, as I'm talking to you right now, yes, gun control is 110% an issue of the left, and lackluster support of the Second Amendment is a thing of the right. There's no reason why that has to be, why there couldn't be some very, 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 very liberal Democrats that are pro Second Amendment. They used to exist. They were known as Blue Dog Democrats, and I don't know what happened to them. Yeah, well, they got canceled. But somebody like AOC. Granted, she has openly supported gun control, and that's that. But she could get rid of that one corner of her political platform and keep all the others, and gun ownership fits in beautifully with it. And so there's Bernie Sanders, who can be a further left politician. Can you think of one? Had been up until essentially he started pretending to be a Democrat because he was always an independent and a socialist. And so, but up until that point, he was always a quite avid supporter of the Second Amendment. Vermont, and any sort of talk of gun control in Vermont, Bernie Sanders was a vocal opponent of. And so there's no reason for it to be partisan. So therefore, bringing somebody partisan in to the organization, like a Donald Trump Jr., like a Clint Eastwood, any sort of person that has a lot. I mean, it'll be hard to find someone that isn't right of center because of the divide that I have mentioned, but bringing on someone who is so partisan as Donald Trump Jr. would be a massive mistake, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's only one person that I could think of, and I'm kind of hesitant to mention it because I don't want it to happen. But I think I'm safe saying this because this is a small podcast. But the person that I think would be best for this, and I don't want it to happen because he would have to leave our board of directors, I think. But I would say Chris Chang, because that would melt the minds of so many people. Mm-hmm. Because you have an eloquent and not just speaking well, but very comfortable in the public eye, gay Asian man, mm-hmm. a married gay man living in San Francisco who teaches people how to shoot. And I think that would shatter so many preconceptions. And so far as I know, the man is squeaky clean. Now, he doesn't have the name recognition of Donald Trump Jr. or any other celebrity, but for gun owners, who are the people that you're trying to attract, they know who he is. And if they don't know who he is, they are inclined to go find out. And when you go, oh, he won Top Shot, I think a lot of people would go, all right, you have my attention.
So you're onto something, and I'll actually go one better. And actually, the more I'm thinking about it, the more it will work. I think the best choice would be Colleen Noir.
That would also be an excellent choice.
He is a famous. He's a famous person. He's got a major YouTube channel. He's been out there a lot. Like, there's no doubt on his support of the Second Amendment. Mm-hmm. Further, he's been pretty tight-lipped about it. But, recently he has taken to speaking out against Democrats quite vocally for obvious and understandable reasons. For the reasons I've said, that they are the pillar of gun control in the country. But I get the feeling that his politics started off a little left of center, and just when it comes to the second, he's right wing only when it comes to the Second Amendment. But I can't exactly speak on that. But he's been very quiet about his politics overall. And the big thing is he's a former mm-hmm. NRA spokesperson. He worked for Ackerman McQueen when he got elevated up to that position as one of their key spokespeople. And
so he knows the people, he knows the terrain. I agree with you. That is a fantastic choice.
And certainly I will say that actually, while he was the NRA spokesperson, I was a big fan of him, and I actually met him in Houston, which was probably the NRA meeting where he actually had a sit down with some of the higher ups at ACMAC to discuss his future with the organization. But at that point in time, when I met him, I was a huge fan, and then he succeeded, and I was more than happy for him. But I found myself watching his channel less and less and less, and then Ackerman McQueen NRA separated, and essentially all the talent got laid off. Cam Edwards lost his job, and Collier Noir lost his job, among many other people. And then he continued his YouTube channel, but now separated from the NRA, and suddenly it got good again, because clearly there were rules and stipulations. You don't get to go there. And now he does what he wants. It's his channel. And as the celebrity 40 facing, he would probably still be limited somewhat, but I wonder if he would have a lot more push, especially given you're the man here to help try to save this organization and win their trust back.
I like it.
He's also a lawyer, which means that he's got no problem reading over every single one of the NRA bylaws and probably hold most of them in memory, and will be very, very quick to see if shenanigans start popping up again, because there's no way we can root out all the rats.
I'm trying to remember how that Spider-Man meme goes. You know, I'm already on board. You don't have to keep selling it to me.
That's true.
We at the Assorted Calibers podcast officially endorse Collier Noir for celebrity spokesman of the NRA.
Wholeheartedly. Yeah. And so best of wishes. Hopefully that will happen. As much of a Pollyanna as I am, I don't know if I can hold too much faith in it, but boy, it would be nice. Certainly, I have my doubts that a kleptocrat will be put at least forward facingly. A kleptocrat will not be placed in the new executive vice president, simply because there's nothing left to steal. And
good word use, by the way.
Yeah, you need to get the trust of the people back. You need to build confidence in order to have a confidence scheme, and confidence has been completely lost with the NRA, as we can see with their absolute plummeting numbers and loss of donation and membership and all that. So, I have a suspicion that even if it's not for honest reasons, an honest executive vice president might come on just to try to take advantage of the sea change so that there can be more money to steal. But it would be nice if this trial just shines a whole lot of sunlight on this mold infested board of directors and just cleans things up. It's a big job, but I'd hate to lose the NRA again. If the NRA is to go away, slack will be picked up, but I don't think we could ever fully recover.
So let's now talk about a celebrity who absolutely should not be the celebrity face of the NRA, despite his history with guns. We are, of course, talking about everyone's friend, Alec Baldwin.
Yes. So, as of course everybody knows, Alec Baldwin shot and killed the director of photography on the set of the Western Rust, and wounded the director of the film while he was practicing a scene with what was told to him, according to I don't know if we've got multiple accounts of it, but for sure Baldwin says that the gun was said to him to be cold, completely unloaded, and he, against all safety protocols from the Screen Actors Guild, was pointing the firearm directly at crew members, and was they were not using any remote setups and all that. And then furthermore, there were some unsafe armor tactics, and the gun was loaded with live ammunition, and he ended up discharging around and killed, but the more important thing was the aftermath. Is the AG of New Mexico got very, very political with this and really crossed some ethical boundaries, so much that it was demanded that they drop the charges. And so the charges were dropped, and we for a moment thought that Alec Baldwin might be scot-free. But double jeopardy only applies to the completion of a trial. And so the charges have now been reinstated. And Alec Baldwin, in a long enough intro there, Alec Baldwin has been charged with manslaughter.
And what I find interesting is that they're only pursuing the manslaughter charge. They aren't pursuing the charge where he also wounded the assistant director.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's the straight-up director. Is the assistant director is the one that pled guilty, was the one that actually handed him the gun.
Okay. But the point being is 2 people were harmed, and they're only charging him for the one, and I'm not sure why this is.
That is a very good point, and I can't answer that. You think they would get him with two counts, and maybe they didn't. Just this, the reporters are only reporting on the heavy one.
Possibly. You know, I knew that Alec Baldwin was in trouble, and I'm not entirely sure when it was. I think it was earlier this year when they were talking about this, and the reporters were using an adjective that I had never seen before applied to the movie Rust. And they started calling it a low-budget movie. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with being a movie made on a low budget, because not all movies require big budgets. You know, they aren't all summer spectacles. They don't all have excessive special effects. But there is, unfortunately, this subtext attached to the phrase low budget that frequently means poor quality. You know, it's bad because they couldn't get more money to do it. And so when the various Hollywood organs started referring to the movie as low budget and throwing subtle shade in that direction, I get the feeling that public opinion towards Baldwin had shifted. Now, I'm not specifically suggesting that they knew this charge was coming, but what I wonder is if they came to the same conclusion we had, that the evidence is piling up and Baldwin is making being his usual unpleasant self, and all of the things he was doing to prove his innocence really have proved that he should have known what he was doing, and they started to subtly distance themselves from him. And so, you know, it's show business, not show friends. And so, well, how do we express our disdain without saying something actionable? Well, the movie is shot on a low budget. We'll just call it a low budget movie. And a lot of people maybe have gone, ew, it was a low budget film. Ugh. I'm not necessarily saying this is here or there. It's just something that I noticed and I thought was interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'd heard it referred to as low budget as soon as it was announced, because it was a smaller budget independent film. But
see, there's a difference between small budget and low budget.
It's true. It's true. But you are right. The Rust being essentially low budget Western Rust as its full title. Is certainly been a lot more common. I'll say I knew Alec Baldwin was completely effed when the rehearsal footage was leaked, likely from a lawyer's office, because it's in Discovery, but a film surfaced where Baldwin was rolling around and rehearsing a gunfight, and stopped in the middle of his marks to ask for some crew members to move to the other side of the camera so that he could point the gun and not flag them.
Mm-hmm.
And this was clearly a rehearsal. He was dry firing the gun, and it was clearly unloaded. And so And so this was very, very similar to that. But why was he reluctant to point a gun at live people in that scene and not the other? It's either massive oversight or massive laziness. And one of the key factors of this being a low budget movie is Hannah Gutierrez Reed, despite the fact that she is Thel Reed's daughter, who was, I think one of the best things to point out is the Quick and the Dead. What was that? Was that the late 90s with Sharon Stone?
That was the one with Leo DiCaprio had a part in it, right?
Correct. Yep. Yes. Sharon Stone.
That was something like, I want to say like 99, 2000, something like that.
It was.
Oh my gosh! No, it was 95.
Okay, that's older than I remember, but yes.
Yeah.
I mean that was Russell Crowe was in that one with who? He was a virtual unknown. And but yeah, and it was directed by Sam Raimi, the director of Evil Dead. But this
and the original Spider-Man trilogy.
Correct. That is correct. And Darkman.
I tried. I could not get into that movie.
It was not good. That's why. But the Sam Raimi Quick and the Dead. The armorer for that one was Thel Reed, Hannah Gutierrez Reed's father, and he was the one that taught all the actors how to do quick draws and how to shoot and how to handle, and essentially supplied most of the firearms for that picture. So yeah, and say what you will about some of the directorial choices. There was certainly some comedic stuff that's very Sam Raimi in there. I loved the movie, but the gun handling was delightfully theatrical. But Hannah Reed, this was her second film as an armorer, and so she was inexperienced, and because of that, they got her for cheap. And we have yet to hear actually what's going to happen of her. I think she's probably not going to fare well at this either.
No, is she the one who pled guilty, or am I confusing her with someone else?
No, that was so the one that definitely pled guilty was Dave Halls, who was the assistant director, and he was the acting armorer at the time. This movie was shot during the pandemic. And so that they were under personnel restrictions, and so Hannah Reed was not allowed into this was shot within a church that's on this ghost town set that's been used for multiple westerns, and they were inside this church, and because of that there was only a certain number of people that could be in an enclosed space at one time due to COVID protocols. And so Hannah Reed did not make the cut. So the assistant director was acting as the armorer. So he was the one that brought the revolver to Alec Baldwin and told him it was a cold gun. And he was charged, and he pled no contest to negligent use of a deadly weapon. And he was given 6 months of probation.
I mean, I hope that Ms. Reed has a good lawyer, because a good lawyer could actually make something of that. Mm-hmm. My client in good faith handed this off to the assistant director, who is not an armorer, and she may have warned him, and then he handed it off to the person, and it's almost like chain of custody, but not really. But the point was, someone who was not qualified handed off a gun, and who knows what might have happened, who knows what should have been said but didn't. A good enough lawyer can introduce enough doubt in a jury that she's got a chance of being acquitted. But I agree with your assessment. I don't think she will be. I think she's going to be the sacrifice.
I think so. I think so as well. I think Baldwin's going to take a hit. I don't know how severe, and she is going to take a hit. I don't know how severe, but It's not going to be, no one's going to get life in prison because, again, this is clearly manslaughter. At no point did anybody express any malice as far as I have seen. So therefore, this was all pure negligence. But I look forward to seeing this case play out, mostly for I want to see Hollywood do a better job when they are handling firearms. The idea that Alec Baldwin didn't even consider clearing the gun when it was handed to him is ridiculous, especially since the command was cold gun. Baldwin did make in one of his interview states that he never checks the gun because in the past, the armorer had handed him a gun and it was staged in such a way that when he checked to make sure it was clear, he screwed up the staging. So if the gun had, cartridges lined up in the cylinder in such a way, if there were hero rounds and dummy rounds set up in such a way, or whatever to make it look just right, the bullets were rotated in such a way because sometimes they usually will cross drill the cases. There's all sorts of reasons on how an actor just confirming that whether a gun's loaded or unloaded could screw it up. And I could see that argument. But if the gun is allegedly cold, completely on empty, what's the harm in flicking open the loading gate and checking the cylinder?
Mm-hmm.
And that should be in the thought process of anybody who has to be on the set handling guns. They may not necessarily have to understand guns. They may not be geeks like us as far as gun goes, but they know that cold gun means that you absolutely should be able to confirm that the gun is unloaded as well. And then furthermore, no, you never point a gun at another living person, even if it's unloaded, because sometimes an unloaded gun isn't unloaded, as Alec Baldwin discovered.
All right, so continuing our theme of good news, and I need to be very specific about this because it's good. It's not as great as it could be. Pennsylvania cannot bar adults under 21 from carrying guns. Court rules is the title. That's not actually what it says. So Pennsylvania is a little bit odd in that you can open carry a gun if you're a legal adult, but you need a license, for example, to carry in a car. One of the other times that you need a license is when there is a state of emergency. And this law has said that during a state of emergency, the laws that ban 18 to 20-year-olds from carrying firearms in public is unconstitutional. So it is good. It's just not as good as the title sounds, unfortunately. But this is the first step in hopefully a process that can be used to further expand Pennsylvania gun rights. And maybe you can use this to say, okay, well, now the next step is permitting 18 to 20-year-olds to get a carry permit. Or maybe we'll allow people to open carry inside their cars and they don't need a permit. Things like that. It's a good thing. It's just not as great as the title sounded, unfortunately.
How about the super stupid federal handgun age restriction? You can go into a gun shop at the age of 18 and pick up an AR-15 in most states. But to go in and pick up a 22 revolver, nope, you're not allowed to. You got to be 21.
Oh, but if your parents give you a gun, then you can have it.
Yeah, in most states, yes.
You can own a pistol if it's a gift, but you can't buy it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because government.
Yep. So yeah, the idea, I mean, I'm firmly in the camp of either you're an adult or you're not. And this like phased in adulthood is crap. The idea that, this person can serve on the military and will have to carry a gun when they are in a combat deployment, but yet when they come home, they can neither drink a beer nor get a carry permit and legally carry a firearm. And that's, if that makes sense to you, then you might need to go to a mental institution, because that's crazy. It just makes no sense. Either you're an adult or you're not. And so I'm more than happy to see this go. All right, here's another one which anyone who's listening, especially to the Weird Audio Fisk, should be able to predict that should be able to foresee this one. But yes, the predictions weren't right. Study examining impact on permitless concealed carry in Ohio. And essentially the long story short is that Ohio in June of 2022 moved on to constitutional carry. So now you do not need a permit to carry in Ohio. And obviously, just like when concealed carry was starting to come off of the restricted list in the 90s, people talked about, people are going to shoot each other over parking spaces. There'll be blood in the streets.
Wild West shootouts.
That's right. And most of the major cities in Ohio, shootings dropped.
They didn't just drop, but they dropped by a fairly significant amount, didn't they?
Several of them did, yes.
Here's one. The city of Toledo, in particular, showing an 18% decline.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and I think this is something you say, and I only remember half the quote. I know that correlation is not causation, but what's the rest of it? You need...
to get causation, you need correlation.
Yeah. And so you can't say that going permitless carry is the cause for the reduced crime, but this does prove that permitless carry did not cause the crime that everyone screamed about happening.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and there were two cities, Cincinnati and Dayton, where firearms related crime went up, though it was only about a percentage point. In Dayton it was statistical noise. the rate was 7.57. Is that per capita? I think so.
Rates per 1,000 people.
Yeah. So, and to 8.04. So yeah, that's like, that's not much. So either way, the some of the places did go up, though granted not a ton. And so that does certainly say that permitless carry 110% will kill violent crime. But certainly, since all these other cities are enjoying some very, very peaceful streets, it certainly doesn't hurt.
Well, that's it for the main topic. Now let's go into the contributor segments. And David is here with an episode I'm calling 49, You're Just Another Fabric in the Wall.
Hi, and welcome to Gun Lovers and Other Strangers. In this segment, I'd like to talk about the relatively unknown FN-49, one of the last of the classic wood-stocked full-size battle rifles. Following the success of their Browning high-power pistol, Fabrique Nationale set their chief firearm designer, Dieudonne Saive, to develop a magazine-fed repeating rifle. Saive, who had worked closely with John Browning prior to his death in 1926, initially experimented with recoil-operated designs throughout the 1930s. Although none of these rifles were production-worthy, they did lead him towards a gas-operated design that was ready for market in the late 1930s, just in time for the impending German invasion of Belgium. In the face of this threat, FN decided to focus on the production of their standard-issue Mauser Model 1935 bolt-action rifles. The new semi-automatic rifle would have to wait. Following German conquest of Belgium in 1941, design documents for the larval stage of what would later develop into the FN-49 were among the plans that Saive brought with him when he escaped to England. Once there, Saive continued development and refinement of his design. The British were sufficiently impressed with this new rifle to order 50 prototypes of what they called the EXP-1 in late 1943. Following tests, The Royal Small Arms Factory at Enfield ordered 2,000 rifles for use in troop trials. However, the clearly imminent end of World War II, as well as some technical difficulties in production, led to the order being first delayed, then cancelled. Not long after the liberation of Belgium in late 1944, Saive was back in Liège, continuing work on his rifle design, which he finalized in 1947 as the FN Fusil Automatique Modèle 1949, or FN-49. The Model 49 is a tilting bolt, gas-operated, semi-automatic, magazine-fed rifle. It has a traditional layout, including a full-length wooden stock. One of the notable features of the FN-49 is the adjustable gas port. This is used to either increase or limit the pressure applied to the system when fired, and includes a gas cutoff for use when launching grenades. One of the less popular features of this rifle is its fixed 10-round magazine. There were numerous challenges facing them. These included the financial and political issues facing a world recovering from a massive conflict, as well as the United States and Britain flooding the Allied countries with their own surplus arms, not to mention the lowering of the Iron Curtain over the Warsaw Pact nations, closing that market to FN. However, this didn't stop them, and undeterred they turned their efforts in other directions. In 1948, Venezuela was the first country to purchase the new rifle, placing an initial order for 2,000 chambered in 7mm Mauser. These were delivered later that year. Ultimately, Venezuela took delivery of just over 8,000 rifles. This initial order was followed by one from Egypt later that same year. While Egypt only requested 100 rifles initially, they eventually purchased over 35,000. The Egyptian rifles were chambered in 7.92 by 57mm, more commonly known as 8mm Mauser. The Belgian government stepped up next with an initial order for 30 test rifles in the spring of 1949. This was followed later that year with an order for 100 more. These rifles were chambered in .30-06 Springfield. The Belgian military even ordered a small run of select-fire rifles which they designated the AFN, which stood for Automatique Fabrique Nationale. Overall, Belgium purchased nearly 90,000 FN-49 rifles, almost half of the Model 49 rifles manufactured during its production run. The fourth contract for FN-49s was to the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg. They purchased close to 6,500 rifles, also chambered in .30-06, in the early 1950s. This was a considerable quantity considering the population of that tiny country was just over 250,000 people at the time. Years later, most of these rifles would be sold on the U.S. surplus market in nearly unused condition. Due to this, as well as their chambering, they are the most desirable of the FN-49s. Argentina ordered a single test rifle in 1948, followed by an order for over 5,500 rifles in 1953 for use by the Argentine Navy. These were chambered in 7.65 by 53mm Argentine, also referred to as 7.65 Mauser. Later, Argentina would modify its rifles to accept removable 20-round magazines and rechamber them to 7.62 NATO. All told, more than 176,000 Model 49 rifles were built for over 26 different countries and chambered in a variety of calibers, including 30-06, 7mm Mauser, 7.65mm Mauser, and 8mm Mauser. There were also smaller numbers chambered in other calibers as proof or prototype rifles for various countries and contracts. Many FN-49s were ordered equipped with scope dovetails, even though most of them were never issued as sniper rifles. By some estimates, nearly half the rifles produced had this feature. Belgian rifles are marked ABL on the receiver, while rifles produced for Luxembourg are marked AL. The Colombian, Argentine, Egyptian, and Venezuelan rifles all bear the national crests of their respective countries on the receiver ring, just behind the upper handguard. The FN-49 was an excellent rifle, but by the time it went into production, it was for an era that had already passed. The FN-FAL eclipsed it so completely that many people have never heard of this classic Woodstock battle rifle, which is a shame.
Venezuela was actually the very first country to order the FN-49, and they did so actually in 1948 originally, when the rifle was still being called the FN-48, before it actually got its final designation.
That about wraps up this segment. If you have any questions for me or suggestions for future segments or a comment on a past segment, please post them on the Assorted Calibers Podcast Facebook or MeWe pages, and Aaron or Weer'd will make sure I see them. I'm also a contributor on the Blue Collar Prepping blog, which can be found at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. Finally, I'm a published author, and books with my stories can be found on Amazon under the names Brena Bock and David Bock. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. I'm David, and this is Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
So the spark that got this segment going was my nephew just bought an FN-49, and we suspect it's a Venezuelan gun, and he was impressed that he finally owns a gun that I'm jealous of, and I really am. This is it's such a cool gun, and I would like to have one someday, though I'm not seeking it out that much because, let's be honest, the big reason why I'm interested in it is that it is the father of my beloved FAL. And then another interesting little trivia bit was David talked about how it was derided for having a fixed 10-round box magazine. But around this time in the 40s and early 50s, a lot of people don't know this, but removable magazine technology did exist, but a lot of the military brass and whatnot argued whether or not they should issue the troops loaded spare magazines or just issue them ammunition on clips of whatever variety. And the big reason for that is that, number one, magazines are expensive. They cost money. Number two, magazines are bulky and heavy, and actually having your ammo on a stripper clip or an end block clip is actually far more compact than having the whole magazine.
I seem to recall this argument also entailing some little bit of our soldiers may not be smart enough to use it.
I've actually never heard that on that one. I certainly saw it with when the first repeating guns came through. If you ever have a chance to handle some late 19th century, early 20th century bolt action rifles, many of them will have a magazine cutoff, a little switch that you can flick that will move the top round of the magazine down below the bolt. And the idea being that the soldiers would single load their firearm and handle it, in the case of, say, the British with the short magazine Lee Enfield. The troops would line up with their with their magazine cutoffs on, and they would single load from a bandolier or a belt pouch, single rounds of .303 into the breech of the gun and close the action and fire. But in the event that things got real hairy, they could flick that switch and then suddenly be able to feed from the magazine directly.
Well, I mean, I may be thinking of that and getting it confused. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I do recall from some reading somewhere that there was that hesitation in using the magazine fed, and so I don't know where I got it. Maybe I'll find it one day.
It certainly was a common sentiment at the time. It certainly had the idea of if we let the troops have even a bolt action rifle with a full magazine, they'll burn through the ammo too fast. You certainly have the either heel magazine release or the magazine release where the magazine doesn't drop completely free was designed as a means to physically remove the magazine and tuck it away so you don't lose it. Yes, there was a lot of we need to coddle the troops because they're too dumb to understand this. So on to our next segment. This being a variety show, I've been pestering Xander to do some segments on farming, since many of the listeners likely have a connection to farms, but also there's got to be quite a few of you listeners who don't have a firm grasp of where our food comes from. He finally answered my call with a segment called Farming Part 1, Clearing Things Up.
Welcome to Independent Thoughts with yours truly, Xander Opal. Weer'd asked me to do a series on what is involved with farming. Wonderful. This is going to be rambling story time, but still shorter than one of Weer'd's stories. Quite a bit of this is going to be personal experience. I welcome Tiny and Heinrich to chime in with their own responses since their experiences vary. Much like shooting, farming varies from state to state and country to country. The lay of the land, laws, regulations, and climate affect things. Tradition as well. Then you've got what individuals and families lean toward. My experience is dairy farming, with nearly all feed grown in-house. Others will have done pure crops of various sorts, for animals or humans. Different animal husbandry, such as poultry, sheep, goats, horses, pigs. I think there's llamas there too. I've had the privilege of clearing land for planting. My nursery had gone out of business about 15 years ago, and my folks opted to rent the ground. There were quite a few young trees and established brush in rows to remove. Lucky me, I got to use a backhoe to pull out the ornamental bushes and trees. I pulled myself backwards as I went along from one end of the field to the other, turn it around and go back, and as I recall it was in midsummer. I didn't want to dig dirt up and make the holes into massive craters if I could help it. Things were going to be rough enough as it was without having to move more soil around. Doing that costs time and fuel and equipment wear. Believe me, it sucks to dig a hole and fill it back in. After the piles of brush were burned, the ashes were tilled back in as the field was smoothed out. We did not use a moldboard plow for this for a couple of reasons. One, there's a thing called dead furrows and over furrows. Dead furrows are where the plow rolled the soil away from a spot. Over furrows are where the soil got laid down on unplowed ground. This creates a series of shallow trenches and long hills in the field that will eventually need to be corrected. Basically, a moldboard plow picks up the soil and flips it over to the side. A potentially bigger issue is that the top few inches of soil loses all structure from the traditional plow's function. In the modern era, that means all these tractors and harvesters easily bog down. There's some 6x6 posts that my father laid down and used to jack up a combine in a field decades ago, and they're still down there somewhere. Soil structure is a bit of a balancing act. You want the plants to have an easy enough time threading roots through. You want any tracks or ruts smoothed out, but you don't want mud. You don't want a hard pan of compacted subsoil that plants can't grow through. Natural fertilizer, that is manure and stubble or cover crop, may be best preserved by tilling it in as well. Tilling in fertilizer and manure prevents it from running into a stream or ditch, which is a waste of valuable nutrients. Going back to clearing a field, tillage also chops up and kills off any weeds at the moment. Those ornamental plants weren't healthy for cattle to eat. The roots weren't fully killed off for several years either. A plow might not get deep enough to take them out, and herbicides necessary might kill off the crops as well. There's no need to breed or otherwise develop crops that resist brush killer herbicides, as that's a rather niche need. I'll be needing to do all these things on a smaller scale as well. Fence rows that haven't been kept clear, and low-hanging tree branches have pushed folks back, allowing more brush and trees to sprout and push further and further into some of the fields. I foresee going around with a chainsaw and pole saw to correct these things, backhoe to dig up stumps and brush, a brush mower to chew up the remnants, and then clean up the dozer blade and disc harrow. Plants, especially the ones thought of as weeds, can be extremely aggressive and relentless in the pursuit of expansion, growth, and reproduction. I'm glad to have modern tools such as herbicides and excavators to work with. My grandfather cleared a peach orchard using a team of horses and block and tackle to rip each tree out by the roots. The tools are still hanging in a shed on the farm. Every so often I look at them, and I'm so very, very glad this isn't the good old days. Many of the tools are the same in function. It just takes less effort to use them both well and poorly. Someone can make more progress in a field in a day than someone 100 years ago could do in a week. Many of the techniques and options were considered back then too, even if only in an I wish sense. I might get to revisit the subject of clearing land again in the future, if I get to play with some rented equipment to clear some even more heavily overgrown land. Now, the next bit of field preparation I plan to cover, and literally sculpting the land. Have fun, be safe. I hope I gave you something to think about. Maybe I should have called this one Grounds for Removal.
I gotta say, that bit about I'm glad it's not the good old days yeah, no, I totally feel that. Like anybody who's like, oh, we need to like, reject modernity and embrace tradition. Oh, like some of the ways that people had to do things. I don't even know how the heck people farmed before the Industrial Revolution. It was just such hard work. But
they had a lot of kids.
Yeah, they had a lot of kids. That's true. Yeah, they had a lot of kids and they worked long, late hours. Heck, as somebody who, while I have worked fish farming, but I've spent a lot of time in commercial fishing, and my daughter and I read Rudyard Kipling's Captain's Courageous, and that book essentially it takes place in the late 1800s on the Grand Banks, and essentially it's a boy who gets thrown off of an ocean liner when they're hit with a wave, and ends up being picked up by a fishing boat on the Grand Banks, and he ends up finishing out their fishing trip with them, and gone from fishing for cod using a diesel boat with a trawl net, to these guys who would go out in little dories and hand line for the cod. So they were literally catching the cod on hook and line for the whole trip. It's just one of those like, oh my God, I cannot believe it. I'm glad it's not the good old days anymore.
Yeah, the good old days before things like antibiotics and electricity and the internal combustion engine.
I mean, there's the big statement of the what's missing from every time travel movie is the person getting sick and dying almost immediately.
I mean, I don't know. You would think that with all of the antibiotics and vaccinations we have, that, I mean, just, catching something like that, I don't know. I mean, if they ate something and then, diarrheaed themselves to death, that's different. But my twist on that is, why aren't all of these people from the future with all of our weird future bugs just spreading massive contagion the same way that the Europeans more or less gutted the native population just with, what was it, smallpox, or all the stuff that we had and they didn't have the antibodies for. Yeah, that would be a real solid way to screw up the timeline. Yeah, we went back in time and we killed everyone with the flu.
Well, there's the rub to it, Aaron, is all of your immunizations are for future diseases, right? And present time diseases, not past diseases.
Okay. It's plausible enough. I'll allow it.
Yeah, I mean some stuff like I used to joke with one of the lab techs that did the DNA analysis for my mice back when I was running a mouse colony, is I just simply said, if I can't see it with my naked eye, it really doesn't exist. I'm a macrobiologist. And so when it comes to the virus evolution, I am not an expert in any way, shape, or form. But again,
but you're practically a doctor, Weer'd.
I'm practically a doctor, yes. But the change of viruses going through, I'm not 100% sure with things like the mumps, measles, and rubella vaccine, where you get one or a series of it. I forget what it is. It's 1 shot or 2 shots, but essentially you get that and then you're done. And there's no need for anything else, versus the flu shot that needs to be annual and the tetanus shot that needs to be every few years. I'm not 100% sure of what makes one last forever and what makes others only last a short period of time. So some of those vaccines may work in the past, but a lot of them aren't.
That's a good question. I mean, I started to say, well, maybe one is caused by a bacterium and the other by a virus, and nope, mumps is caused by a virus. So I don't know.
Yeah, no, the only bacteria I mentioned is tetanus.
I mean, really, of all of us, you're the one who should know. After all, you've worked in the medical field. You're practically a doctor.
I am practically a doctor. Please do not take medical advice from Weer'd Elizabeth Beard. He is not actually a doctor. But Aaron, do you know who are doctors?
I mean, I would imagine that at least one of our listeners has a doctorate somewhere.
No, all of our listeners, each and every one of them. You are an honorary doctor until this podcast is over. Please do not take legal advice from me. But we do appreciate all of our listeners. You guys are wonderful people. You put up with silliness like this. And we appreciate all you do for us. But we have to give a very special thanks to all of our supporters on Patreon. So you can go to Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/SortingCalibers podcast to sign up. Patrons get an early release of the podcast, plus bonus content like the hilarious ACP blooper reels, the ACP film tracks, and the ACP Magnum.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share with your friends, both online and off. And also, please be reminded, if you listen on Google Podcasts, that service is going away on April 1st, so you'll need to switch. This is not an official endorsement, by the way, but my smartphone is an Android, and I'm very much enjoying the app titled Pocket Casts. It's absolutely free, and I really like the interface. And since I had been using Google Podcasts, I've switched over to this. There's like no learning curve, and I really, really like it. So check it out, and maybe it'll work for you. And if not, you'll have to find something else.
Awesome.
But
Aaron,
I like Pocket
Aaron,
Casts.
hook a link to Pocket Cast in the show notes. Not just for our listeners, but also for me.
Sure thing.
I got a blog. It's called WeerdWorlds.com. That's WEERD World.com. And you can hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can get more from me at Linktree/Aaron Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Aaron Paulette, all one word. And by the way, Pocket Cast is also available on the Apple App Store. So it's for, both sides of the smartphone political divide.
People with good phones and people with the terrible ones.
I like how you left that vague.
I mean, it's a straight up war in my household. My daughter and my wife both entirely use Apple products, but I am firmly in the droid army. And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
Well, if we were Star Wars droids, I would, of course, be a very cute, very spunky astromech unit. And, well, we all know what Weer'd would be, right?
Gonk!
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You would be a gonk droid. I'm gonna coin a term here, Weer'd. Our droid sonas are assorted, and so's our podcast. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Gonk.